January 11th, 2041. Well, good fucking morning, book friend. Were you expecting someone else? It's still me, your trusty creator. I'm sorry that I started our day off with a lie. It's not a good morning, and it isn't a good anything. Well, despite all odds, I'm still alive. I'm not quite sure how that makes me feel. Maybe one day I'll just stop running and let these things take me. No, that was another lie. I will never give in to those motherfuckers. Those that have taken my friends and family. Those that came without invitation to destroy and pervert the world of my ancestors. They will not kill me. It will be I who is the first of man to kill one of them. Go ahead and laugh. Everyone else does. I swear on the consciousness within my head, I'll find a way to take them from this earth, or be damned in my pursuit. Forgive my temper, but you're the only one I have to share my thoughts with. I'm getting so fucking tired of this God's damned hole. But if we leave now, it's almost a guarantee that Mr. Fuzzyfuck will make a meal of us before we have a chance to fulfill our reason for living. I'm not sure if I filled you in on my naming schema, book friend. I like to give them cute little nicknames that always end in fuck. Other survivors have told us about ones they'd had encounters with, heard about, or received supposedly divine knowledge from. Which means that those things got into their fucking heads. But apparently, they have these grandiose and alien names. Some even have titles. I refuse to allow them to be named. Names are for people and companions of people. I do not give them identity or humanity. They are plague and disease. They are a sickness that only deserves to be cleansed in fire and blood. They get what I give them. Got a little dark there. Anywho, Mr. Fuzzyfuck had been lingering around the area since I heard him kill that man. Fucking lingerer. Something my mom always used to say. Well, without the fuck part. I didn't get it, but it made her laugh. So, it made me laugh. It's all about the small victories, you know? Anyways, I knew it was waiting around for me. It didn't know it was me specifically, but it remained nonetheless. That's why we were hiding out, if you remember. So, day 3 of the waiting game, which was the 7th, 5 days ago now. I was planning on spending the rest of that day writing and compiling information about the false gods. Now, as I told you, book friend, I survive. Part of that is always being ready and not making the same mistakes twice, because chances are, if you're lucky enough to survive the first time, your luck will have run out by the second time. I learned the hard way once, fleeing with my mom when we were playing the waiting game. We had to make a run for it with no time to pack our gear or food. While we acted quickly and survived the initial ordeal, the loss of our food and supplies left us cold, hungry, and more than a little fucked. Having learned that lesson, I keep everything I don't immediately need or am not using packed and ready to go. So I'm sitting in the empty room that has been my home for the last few days. At first it smelled like mold and must. After being trapped in there for a few days, I'm sure you can imagine how it smelled. Light filtered in through the old stained pieces of cloth I'd found lying around and used to cover the windows. Shadows would often dance across those covers and cause my heart to fall through its place in my chest. The thing is, I don't know if that was our friendly Mr. Fuzzyfuck, or just tricks of the Quilted Sky. But each time, I could only hear my mind screaming in panic. It found me. It found you. It found me. It found me. Even though I was losing my shit internally, I kept it cool and calm because I'm a stone-cold gangster. Honestly, I don't even know what that is. A man at one of the communities called me that a long time ago when I was a kid. Pretty sure it was after he told me I didn't need to be afraid of the monsters because we were in a safe place. I responded that they should be afraid of me because I was going to kill every single one of the rat fucks. The old man chuckled and said,
Son, you're a stone-cold gangster.
It felt like a compliment, but my mother looked at us both quite disapprovingly. She never would tell me what it meant, either. So, as I sat calm and quiet in a decrepit room that smelled of mold, shit, and piss, something stone-cold gangsters don't usually do, but that I did because I am one. Something I'd not planned for happened. In one of the rooms above me, somebody started coughing. And I don't mean like a "my throat is itchy" type of cough. I mean like an "I thought I was a fish and could breathe in water, but turns out I'm a dipshit and have to cough the water out of my non-amphibious lungs" type of cough. My heart sank entirely out of my chest and through the fucking floor this time. Out of all the scenarios I'd imagined and planned for, this was nowhere on the list. There was a person in the same building as me, a woman, as it would turn out, sleeping what added up to only a few dozen feet away from where I slept. As I suffered a mild heart attack, the coughing fit continued, which sent my brain into a further shock-induced paralysis. After a few seconds slower than I'd have liked, I had my pack secured and was out my door and creeping down the hall towards the stairwell and exit. Always know your exits. The only reason I was able to get out of my room was that the woman happened to be on the floors above me instead of the other way around. People often go to the top floor of a building for what they perceive to be safety, further away from the ground. Makes sense, right? Not if you have to run. It just means you're further away from the exit. I usually pick the second floor of multi-level buildings, off the ground, but closest to the exit. It couldn't have been more than 10 seconds from the start of the coughing fit until the second uninvited guest joined my building. This one, however, made one fuck of an entrance. I'd just made it into the pitch-black stairwell, my pounding heart and ragged breath practically echoing off the confined cement walls of the dark space. My hands gripped the handrail as I began to take the steps. Suddenly, the whole place shook, accompanied by what sounded like the crack of thunder. I lost my footing and took a much quicker, albeit more painful, trip down the stairs. The thunderous noise continued as the building shook and pieces started raining from the ceiling. Thankfully, I was on the second floor because by the time I got to the exit door, the concrete stairwell was already cracking and crumbling. Usually, I'd slightly crack the door, allow a little daylight in so my eyes could adjust, and listen for sounds. Clearly, there was no time for such cautions, and I sprinted out of that place like it was on fire, suffering from temporary visual impairment due to the extreme change in brightness. Always be prepared. I can't stress that enough. When choosing a place to camp, I'd already surveyed the area, made a crude map of the surrounding buildings and roads, then studied it many times in my boredom. That is why, even though I was briefly unable to see, I already knew where I was and where I was going to go. I sprinted with all the energy I could muster in my stiff legs. To be fair, fear helped my body overcome its non-ready state pretty quickly. Running across the street and into an alley, I took a door into a building that I'd previously visited and put tape over the latch bolt so that it would open from the outside. Tape is a survivor's best friend. As I ran through this building, which was what appeared to be a storage house filled with decrepit old furniture, I tossed a makeshift incendiary device into a pile of dried, broken wood. This is what I like to call a distraction. If my uninvited house guest gets bored toying with its prey, the idea is it'll go check out the burning building while I get the fuck out of town. I don't know what the hell was on that wood, but it went up quick. Too quick. By the time I'd reached the opposite end of the building, thick smoke was already billowing and almost forcing me into a coughing fit, not unlike the one that started this whole mess. Once again blinded, I exited the building and continued to snake through alleys and other buildings in the chosen of my pre-planned routes. Now, you might be asking yourself, why waste time going through these buildings and following passages? Simple. Sight and scent. If that asshole creature spots me, it'll be all over me like flies on a dead man's eyeball. And if it's one that can hunt by smell, I want as many obstacles in its way as possible. Behind me, I could hear catastrophic smashing and screaming of the poor woman. It wasn't over quickly, but soon enough, I could also hear the sounds of crackling flames. My handiwork. The distraction I'd set off happened to be both a blessing and a curse. A gift for that unknown and now dead woman, because the thing decided there was something else to chase. And a curse for me, because I was the something else. I got my first look at it when I incorrectly felt like I was a reasonable distance away and took a moment to stop and peer out from one of the windows in a building I was passing through. It was at this time that Mr. Fuzzyfuck charged through the building I'd set on fire. It smashed and tore apart the blazing structure, and I couldn't help the fear and dread that momentarily took hold over me, watching the ferocity of that thing. It stood, I'd guess, about 20 feet tall. My closest comparison would be to that of a grizzly bear. Not that I'd ever seen one, but I used to love studying the old taxonomy book we had. Its bear-like body was far more humanoid than ursine, but with powerful bulging muscles. The fur covering it from head to toe reminded me of the poofy dandelion seeds that blow away in the wind. Hence this adorable fellow's nickname, Mr. Fuzzyfuck. Well, that's not so scary, you're thinking to yourself. That's because I haven't gotten to the fucked up part. Two black and beady eyes that were incredibly undersized to be proportionate and far too close together to be functional rested in the center of its head. A pair of enormous bat-like ears sat at attention atop it, twitching and aiming all around in search of prey. But the worst part was the mouth. It started just under the eyes and continued almost halfway down its body. I'm not sure how to describe this thing's biology in a way that makes sense, but trust me when I tell you that half its fucking body is a mouth. Teeth like spears pointed out in every direction and were stained with blood. Still stuck in the teeth were pieces of that woman. We have the great misfortune of dealing with a member of what I've dubbed the ravening class. These things' hunger is like a constant state of psychotic rage. The only force that drives them is hunger, and unfortunately, next in the food line is me. How to deal with this type of creature is to stay the fuck out of its way until the hunger drives it to seek more readily available prey. Clearly, it didn't get me. At least, not yet. But I promise you, it wasn't for lack of trying. The look of hatred in its small, beady eyes as it swiped at and demolished the crackling, burning building in search of flesh had my heart in my throat. All the while, its fur smoldered from the flames, but never burned, giving it a living coat of smoke. Fucking terrifying. I'd be lying if I said I didn't already have more than one nightmare about the bastard finding me and ripping me out of my hole. That's what the nicknames are for. How could anyone possibly be afraid of something called Mr. Fuzzy Fuck? Defeat the enemy in your mind to preserve clarity and continue survival. While MFF was busy rampaging through my diversionary fire building, I took the opportunity to run like the fuck. Some people run like the wind. I think those people are idiots. I run like the fuck because they're never there when you need them. I like to think it's because they run so fast that they get the hell out of all the bad situations. Those are the fucks I model my running after. So, as quietly as I could, I ran and searched for a place to hide. Locked buildings were immediately skipped. Breaking a window was out of the question, and lockpicking took time I didn't have. I came to a building that had a sloped concrete path that led below ground level. Perfect. That was what I naively thought at the time. I ran down the slope into an open area filled with old, rusted, most certainly not operational, cars. Frantically, I looked around and spotted a door, metal and rusted, like everything else down there. I pulled, and it gave a squeak, but was otherwise stuck in place. The roars and crashing in the background told me that MFF was closing in, tearing its way through the town. I pulled a crowbar from my pack, lodged it into the door jamb, and waited for the thing to make another loud noise to mask mine. A crash in the distance, and I pushed as hard and as quickly as I could. The door popped open with a terrible screech. I stood frozen at the noise, and for a few seconds, it seemed as if the whole world did too. It was so quiet, I swear you could hear fuck fleeing in the distance. That moment was shattered by the ravenous fury of Mr. Fuzzy Fuck. It had heard my door opening because it blazed a trail of destruction right for me. I scrambled to get my ass in that door and as far away from that thing that wanted desperately to meet me. While running blindly through a pitch-black room, I smashed into a few metal pipes and banged myself pretty good. It was while my vision was spinning with white dancing spots and my ears rang that I decided to take a few extra seconds that I didn't have and fish out one of my few and precious torches. These are hard to make, harder to come by, and only to be used in an emergency. I'd say this counted. The hissing red flame blossomed to life and gave me life-saving visibility. I could hear my new friend smashing through a building so close that the ground shook. Forward. Always move forward. Right or wrong, there's no going back. Not in this world. I climbed over and through a mess of pipes when I saw descending stairs. That was the best case scenario I could have hoped for. Further underground. At this point, I was almost certain I'd be huddling in the corner of the room and waiting until it tore its way through enough concrete to pull me out. Nerves pushed my legs to take the steps in 3s and 4s, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. I could feel its footsteps quickly approaching my building now. It was in the area I'd first entered, with all the rusted cars, smashing and destroying. My heart raced as I sprinted down those stairs, past 2 doors before making it to the bottom. At this point, I knew it wouldn't be able to see my flame, but almost certainly had beyond excellent hearing, so I quieted my footsteps as much as possible, looking for anywhere to hole up. Ironically, that was the phrase I'd used in my thoughts. Be fucking careful what you wish for, eh? I didn't even see it at first, walking into a large and empty concrete room and feeling like a small animal caught in a trap. Nowhere to run and no escape. Then I spotted it, a metal circle in the floor. Not the first time I've seen one of these convenient little survival holes. An incredibly miserable way to survive as well. Definitely the last place I'd want to die. But I removed the metal cover, climbed down the ladder, and replaced it over the top of me, because I am going to survive. There's little down here but more concrete and tunnels. If I had a map, I'd consider taking the tunnels, but I don't. And these old world mazes have taken the lives of many would-be survivors. The tunnels are a last resort. For now, I play an even less fun version of the waiting game. More details tomorrow. I need to conserve my candle. I only have a few left. And blowing through them all, being trapped in the dark with nothing to do and nothing to look forward to, will not help my sanity. I promise I will return to you tomorrow, my only friend. Good night, survivor.